As we continue our study of polynomials, we want to look at the division of polynomials. And specifically in this section, we're going to do two things. The first thing is we are going to divide out polynomials using long division and synthetic division. That part should be reviewed. The second part we're going to look at is we're going to look at remainder theorem and rational root theorem to figure out possible zeros. And you might or might not remember it. It was taught real briefly in a previous math course, but we want to review that so we can see how all those pieces start to fit together for larger polynomials. So to begin, when dividing a polynomial by another polynomial, if the remainder is 0, we can say the divisor is a factor. So just as a reminder back from 3rd grade, if I had 48 divided by 8, what I did was I said, okay, how many times is 8 going to 48? You would say 6. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract, and then get the remainder. So this one was 6 remainder 0. If I had 47 divided by 8, you would say, okay, how many times is 8 going to 47? That would be 5. 5 times 8 is 40. You would subtract, and you'd get 7. And you'd write that as 5 7/8, or 5 remainder 7. We're going to take that same approach, but now we're going to deal with polynomials where we've got variables in it. We've got these x's we're going to solve. And we're going to do it two ways. The first way is with long division. And we're going to use the exact same algorithm or the exact same process you did up here with your long division, where you're going to ask yourself how many times does one thing go into another. You'll multiply those two values, you'll subtract, and then you'll bring down the next portion if you've got more to bring down. So the question here, is x minus 3 a factor of 6x cubed plus 2x squared minus x plus 3? How will we know if x minus 3 is a factor? Well, we're going to know if this is a factor if the remainder is 0. So we're going to do long division to figure out, do I get a remainder of 0? So we'll start out by writing 6x cubed plus 2x squared minus x plus 3. And when we do this, it's important to make sure we go in descending powers for each of our terms, divided by x minus 3. So the first thing I want to ask myself is what times x gives me a 6x cubed? I'm only looking at the x piece out here. What times x gives me 6x cubed? And the answer is 6x squared. So we're going to write the 6x squared over the x squared term that we've got down here. Now when I multiply 6x squared times x, I get 6x cubed. 6x squared times a negative 3 is a negative 18x squared. Now just as we did up here when we said 6 times 8 is 48, we then subtracted, which is then saying we're going to change the sign of each of our pieces. Same thing's going to be true down here. When we subtract, we've got to switch each of the signs. So this positive 6x cubed becomes a minus 6x cubed. This negative 18x squared becomes a positive 18x squared. So that subtraction step means switch all the signs. Now I can see here 6x cubed minus 6x cubed is 0. 2x squared plus 18x squared is going to be 20x squared. Now we can bring down the next piece, which is a minus x, and I ask myself, what times x gives me 20x squared? And the answer there is going to be 20x. So 20x times x gives me a 20x squared. 20x times negative 3 gives me a negative 60x. We subtract by switching both of the signs. 20x squared minus 20x squared is that 0x squared, which is good. Minus x plus 60x is going to be 59x. And then we'll bring down our plus 3. Then I ask myself, what times x gives me a 59x? That answer will be 59. So 59 times x gives me the 59x. 59 times negative 3 is going to give me a negative 177. We subtract, and when we subtract, we switch all of our signs. And we end up with a remainder of 180. And the way to write that is 180 over my divisor. Just like up here it was 7 over 8. Right here we're 180 over x minus 3. So do we have x minus 3 as a factor? This is not a factor. And the reason for that is because we have this remainder of 180 after our division. This is one way that you could write it. If you would like to write it in another expanded format, that's perfectly fine. But in terms of what we want to know for this problem, all I want to figure out is what is the remainder, if there is a remainder. So the remainder here is 180, or 180 over x minus 3.